So we wanted to bring in Paul Carcaterra to talk about this. Carc, thanks so much for coming on. And I want to start at the micro level with this, with the individual athletes in terms of the name, image, and likeness thing. And what do you see? I mean, who at this point, because we talked about Mitchell Pelkey to start this broadcast and sort of what he does off the field to generate revenue. What about the athletes on the field? I mean, is there a number of athletes you see being able to profit off of this, or is it more of a limited amount over the course of time being able to use this to their advantage?
You know, I think eventually you're going to see, some transformational type players that can warrant the name, image, and likeness in terms of just benefiting individually. You know, I look at the past like, you know, if we had a Lyle Thompson in the game right now, or if we had a Mikey Powell in the game right now, if we had a Kyle Harrison or a Paul Rabel in the game right now, I think that the conversation could change. I look at the current landscape right now. There's a few players that I think potentially could warrant that type of conversation and be a hot commodity, whether it's a Connor Schellenberger from Virginia, a Chris Gray from North Carolina, a Brennan O'Neill, from Duke. There's a handful of players. But to be quite honest with you, Tom, I think it's just so early right now that, you know, it went from like 0 to 60, right? Like the end of June, it was like, it's coming. And then July 1st, it hits. It's a little overwhelming in terms of just like the information that's out there, what you're hearing, in regards to like a profound type of impact in terms of the exposure and the monetary value attached to a player and a brand. I think in the sport of lacrosse, it's a little early. I think we'll take the lead and we'll see what happens with college football, obviously with college basketball. But there's a number of, I think, factors that have to kind of flush out and learn as we go. But look, the game of lacrosse is in the healthiest spot I think it's maybe ever been. It's the fastest growing team sport in the country. There's great exposure. These players have their own individual brands already through Instagram and Twitter, so there's a personality attached to these athletes. I'm just not sure how it coincides, like monetarily for these players. How do they actually cash in, and how do they tie themselves to a brand that would allow? I will say, out of all of the men's players currently in the game, there's the few that I mentioned, but I think in the sport of lacrosse, men's and women's, the college player that I think potentially has the most on-field appeal and off-field appeal as well is Charlotte North, and I think her style of play just mirrors and reflects a superstar. She's a different type of player in the men's and the women's game. Her style and the way that she plays, it's just it's very artistic, and it's appealing. I've seen Charlotte on a number of occasions this summer because my daughter's playing club lacrosse, and she's been in a couple of the tournaments and camp where she's been. She is like an absolute rock star, and the young female athletes flock to her. There's so much more too that she can just give the game of lacrosse, men's or women's. I look what she does on the women's front. There's some things that I think, if you're a young male, you want to adopt a lot of those attributes in the way that she handles the stick and the way that she plays the game, the way that she sees the game. So I think in all of college lacrosse, she's the one, male or female, that I think has separated herself on the field to warrant the conversation of the name, image, and likeness and making sense in terms of just the value that she has.
Yeah, do you think maybe going the direction of, you mentioned camps and club things going on this summer, like that could be the avenue a lot of these different lacrosse players take, maybe starting their own businesses that we see them do when they graduate and going around the country and teaching camps instead of doing that afterwards, they do it now. Maybe that could be more of what maybe they can make some money off of too?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's the right thing to do too, because, you have a situation where, whether it's Charlotte North or Brennan O'Neill, and, in the past, they can't use their name or their image or their likeness to promote themselves in a business in the summertime. Now they can. And Charlotte North is the draw. So if she wants to start something, whether it's in the summer or in the off season during the holiday break and have a camp or a clinic, she could use her name. She could use her image. She could use her likeness to promote the actual value that she's giving the young campers. So I think that, to me, is probably the first thing lacrosse will see a major change, because if you think lacrosse, it's built in already for lacrosse. There's a huge camp business already. There's a huge travel tournament business already. If there's a young star in the game after his or her freshman year, I mean, there's the market for that, right? We don't know what the market is for all the different manufacturers attaching themselves to these athletes from a lacrosse perspective. College basketball might be a little different. College football might be a little different. But I'll tell you, just by understanding the game and seeing the game in the summertime and the off season, there's a huge market for traditional camps. There's a huge market for skill development. That's built in already for the athlete to take, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Already as part of the structure of the sport itself. And like you said, there's other things that are overwhelmingly unknown right now. And I think we could take lessons that, with lacrosse coming not until the spring now, after this has all been said and done, to learn some of those lessons and see how that fits with the manufacturers and the school deals and whatnot. Macro level, Paul, I mean, on a program-by-program basis and looking at the sport, I mean, I've seen some, a couple people say, well, how this might hurt the game or other sports, not just lacrosse, in terms of programs suffering and be even losing their programs. Or there's the other side where it says it grows and helps maybe the little guy where someone wants to be a star. On a macro basis, how do you think this impacts things with athletes choosing where to go, or how this impacts the big top-tier teams and some of those middle major teams as well?
Well, take college football, for example, right? If you play for Alabama, or you play for Clemson, if you play for Georgia, the exposure, the built-in TV exposure every week, that you can tie to your brand and you're front-facing all the time. That's significant. Lacrosse has its own version of that. There are a tremendous amount of teams that get more television opportunities than others. So I do feel like it's something that we don't know just yet, but there is a trickle down to this, and how it flushes out. I think we're going to have to just kind of live it and see, and then digest and see how it goes. But you'd hate to see that too, because in the sport of lacrosse, some of the beauty is seeing in Albany in 2018 going to the Final Four, right? And making those magical runs. You want that for the sport. You just don't want it to be a top-heavy game. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of growth at the youth and high school level, which, fosters the opportunity for those programs to make a run. So I also think in lacrosse, too, for the athletes, you want them to have every opportunity. And I think the name, image, and likeness is a great first step for these athletes to promote themselves and get what they deserve. You just want everyone to kind of digest and take things slowly. You don't want to see also any athletes getting taken advantage and signing deals that maybe are longer than they should be, and they're not getting their value because, July 1st hits and everyone is really excited and, wants to go out there and do it. I think everyone needs to proceed just with details, if that makes sense.
Yeah, learning about the process. And we've seen some universities and colleges work on that education aspect as well, which has been so important.
Yeah, they're ahead of the game, Tom.
Yeah.
There's some coaches I've talked to, too, that saw this coming, that have done an incredible job educating their players, their staff, to what is the current state.
Yeah, it's amazing that there's a whole industry, it seems, of educators that have come in, to work with these universities and colleges. And within the universities, they've made their own task forces that come in and give these kids some information about how to handle this. And maybe that's a good thing. We haven't seen too many of these pop up in the last week, of kids all of a sudden coming in and getting an endorsement that they're actually doing the homework. I think is something important too at the end of the day.
Yeah, precisely. You want everyone to be educated. Look, first and foremost, you want the athlete to have every opportunity for him or her to succeed and use their brand and use their likeness. But with that, there's variables, right? You have to know exactly what you're getting into, and those schools that have taken the time and that have seen this coming, those athletes are more equipped to make the right decisions.
Yeah, and back when you played, Paul, I mean, you could have done some sort of pasta shop in Syracuse or whatever, right? I mean, you could have been out there front and center back in your day.
Look, yeah, absolutely. And in college, I lived with Casey Powell. He was one of those athletes today that would probably be at the forefront of striking some deals. So I'd be pushing him to get, like, multiple fast food deals, Chipotle cards, just so I could kind of just live off of him a little bit.
Right. Absolutely. Paul Carcaterra, appreciate your time, of course, as you've been busy on the road this summer doing and experiencing lacrosse, the summer hub. So we appreciate the time and your perspective on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Be well.